I'm Bob Bakert with Jazz Guitar Today, and we're here with Wayne Krantz. You've got a hell of a story to tell us about Wayne Krantz Music Room 1985, which is your new release, which is coming out tomorrow. What people don't know about this yet, I guess some people probably do from press releases, is that you recorded this 36 years ago. Tell us about this new project of yours, Wayne Krantz Music Room 1985.
You know, I'd read somewhere recently that my friend Chris Potter had just made a record. Chris Potter, the great saxophone player, had just made a record where he played all the instruments. And maybe I read about it like, I don't know, 3 months ago or something, somewhere. Not sure where I would have seen it, because I make it a policy never to read music magazines, Bob, because they always depress me. Because it's filled with people doing stuff generally that I'm not doing. And so in order to kind of preserve my self-esteem, I don't look at them very often. But somehow I found out that that Chris had done that, and it just kind of reminded me in a flash that I had done the same thing back in '85 when I'd first moved to New York and didn't know anyone. Kind of was faced with the same thing that everybody's faced with when they first go to the city, I guess, which is, what do you do? How do you get involved? I mean, some people crack it by going to school there, but I'd already gone to school in the backwater of Boston. And so when I finally arrived to New York, I really didn't know anyone, didn't know how to get on the scene, had no contacts. So I thought, well, maybe I'll make a record and just enter the scene as a recording artist. You know, I was thinking, because I mean, my original plan had been sort of to try to work as a sideman. I'd never really done sideman stuff. I had it in my mind that I wanted to play with famous people and tour the world and stuff. And since I didn't know how to do that, I thought, well, let me make a record. Maybe that'll help somehow. So I made this thing, played all the instruments. I actually went out to LA to make it because a friend of mine had a little home studio in his garage. And so I went out there for a month in July of '85 and recorded this thing, you know, played guitars on it, obviously, some keyboards, bass, and programmed drums. And, you know, took it back to New York, and I remember sending it around. It was just labels then. It was just kind of major labels. There weren't really, I mean, to my knowledge anyway, there weren't really, it's not like today where there's, you know, you've got a label, I've got a label, you know, your grandmother has a label, the cab driver has a label.
You know about my grandmother's label, huh?
I hear it's on fire. I tried to get on it.
Awesome.
She sent me a very nice rejection letter, actually.
I have an in. We'll talk later.
Okay. No, it was just whatever, the majors and kind of the offshoots of the majors. And I sent it around to some and got rejected by everyone. And basically kind of nothing too much happened on that front, but I did start using it as a demo to send to people that I, you know, just people that I were working, doing international stuff from New York that I thought I could play with, would like to play with. And it ended up being kind of a nice demo for me. I mean, it gave me my first professional gig on the road, which was with Carla Bley Band. And that project directly led to that gig. So it was good. I mean, it helped me. It helped me get on the scene in New York. And I loved it very much at the time. It meant the world to me. But, you know, things, whatever, when things started happening, it kind of started, it was, you know, further and further in the rearview mirror. And I did start working as a sideman, which I did for, I don't know, 5 to 8 years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, something. When it came time 5 years later to make a record, I'd been working with Lainey Stern, and she was on this label called Enja Records, which was a little German jazz label. And, you know, I got to know the guy that ran that. And one day just got up the, you know, wherewithal to say, hey, can I make a record on your label? And he said, yeah. And at that point, I wasn't even really thinking about the old project. It was 5 years old at that point. And I had some people that I wanted to play with on a record and stuff. And so I just kind of moved on from there. And it just kind of faded from view. And it wasn't until I was reminded of that dynamic of doing a project by yourself, playing all the instruments, that I tried to find it and I couldn't. It wasn't, I hadn't heard it in 20 plus years. And so this friend of mine, I kind of reached out to people that might have copies, and one friend had it on VHS. He had a copy on VHS, but he didn't have a way to play it. So he didn't know if the tape was still preserved, and this whole scene, you know. So we found a studio that had a machine that could play it. So we had to rent that. And it turned out to be just in absolutely perfect shape, like pristine, sounded exactly like it did when I made it. And I was kind of thinking, like, in the back of my mind, that if I liked it, maybe I'd try to put it out. And I wasn't sure about that because I'm not one to kind of look back much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing that too much, generally, my stuff. But it has such a vibe on it. It just you know, reached out from 35 years ago, and it just put me right back in that head. I remembered exactly what it felt like to make it, and that just seemed too cool to pass up. So I put it out, kind of hoping that people might enjoy it. You know, it's old, but I mean the sounds on it are fairly. There's nothing particularly rooted in the time in terms of the sonics of it. It's really straightforward sounds. You know, there's nothing trendy about the sounds. Like I didn't choose 80s drum sounds. I just chose like the most straightforward drum sounds, and the guitars, everything's direct, so it's just guitar into the board, and the keyboards, it's a little bit of like new wave in the keyboard sound, but not too much, you know, not so much it's just ridiculous. It's not a joke. So it was kind of it was an easy choice to make, to try to put it out. And yeah, I hope people get something from it. It's like it feels great to do it because, as I say, I had so much invested in it. Nobody ever heard it.
Well, good music holds up.
Yeah.
You know, well, look at what, you know, I mean, the Steely Dan records. I mean, obviously you played with them, but I mean, how old are they? And they're still fresh as can be when you turn them on and listen to them.
That's true. That's true.
You know?
Although it's strange. I mean, I listened to the Night Fly for the first, not Steely Dan record, but I listened to it for a really long time. And I was surprised to hear some of the sounds kind of sounded a little bit of the period. I mean, it's still great, obviously, but
right.
It is a little bit more rooted in its time than I remembered it. So I think that can happen. You know, we just kind of, I mean, it makes sense to use the sounds of the time, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you do that, then your thing is going to sound like it's of that time for all time remaining. And
yeah,
it's just funny how it doesn't sound that way. So,
I listened to some of it, and you know, I didn't hear anything that I go, oh wow, that's, you know, that's 1980s. I thought, oh, that's, you know, that's pretty happening, you know. And so I don't see that at all. You know, I think the playing on it is great. You know,
thanks, Bob.
compositionally, I you know, it's really not. I mean, you know, I think it held up really well. I can see why you're proud of it and want it out. It's going to be out tomorrow, and people are going to tell you. You know, it's interesting. When I was listening to it, and whenever I talk to anybody, I want to do as much background as I possibly can. So I've been listening to a lot of your music over the last several days. You know, I see what you're playing today, and I see, you know, how do you feel your style back then was compared to your style today, if there's any change at all? I mean, do you feel how do you, you know, what do you feel the differences are in your playing that people might want to look for or gravitate towards or something of that nature?
Sure, yeah. There's some basic things that I don't think have changed a lot. Like, it's clear from listening to that old project, 85, that, you know, there was some rhythmic stuff happening on it that that indicated that, you know, rhythm was going to be a big deal for me with my music, and it has been. It stayed like an important focal point of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the biggest change that I can see really is it's become so much more improvisational. Like, there's not really much improvisation at all on Music Room 1985.
It's compositional.
all composed.
Yeah.
There's one solo on it. There's an actual guitar solo on it at some point, and there's a few little soloistic things that happen without really being solos per se. But by and large, it's very composed.
Right.
And up until the record that I made previous to this release, which was a year and a half, 2 years ago, I made a record called "Write Out Your Head," which
Mm-hmm.
again is all composed. I mean, there's like 3 sort of short saxophone solos on it and 1 fuzz solo. But those 2 records are really the only time that I've made records that don't have improvisation on them. And in fact, they've become more and more improvisational
Mm-hmm.
as years have gone on. So, like when I made Music Room 1985, I didn't know how to improvise. I knew how to solo.
Wow,
Kind
that surprises me.
I
Yeah.
sort of knew how to, I'd take a
Yeah.
solo on it. And I guess the solo is improvised, but my conception of improvising was just kind of more conventional. It was more jazz based. Um, I played lines like 8th and 16th note lines and stuff. And I remember like when I made that record, like that was kind of the beginning of, well, I shouldn't say that. It really, no, come to think of it, it took another 10 years after that to really shake the sort of post bebop sensibility that I kind of deferred to as a soloist. But it was super different because I wanted to make some combination of pop and jazz that didn't exist at the time. And I thought the way to do that was to make songs that were built like pop songs, that had verses and bridges and choruses, that didn't have many solos, if any, and that were really, really focused on melody, the melody of the thing.
Right.
And, smooth jazz didn't really exist yet at that point. And there wasn't really any model for that. It sort of wasn't, I mean, at least in my awareness, it was kind of well, this is an opportunity. Let me see if I can pull this off, because it's not like I heard a lot of people doing that.
The video that goes along with the tune Cowboy, it kind of says it all, because you've got all these I don't want to give too much of it away, but you show
Oh,
pictures of
give it all away.
yeah. Sure, here, everybody. But you show,
Oh,
you show pictures of Madonna, you show pictures of Lionel Richie, you show pictures, and if you think about that, was the music of that time,
that's the
and
point of that.
then you juxtapose or you reconcile, the music of that time to what you're listening to.
Yeah.
Excuse my expression, but you go, holy shit, I mean, there's a holy shit moment there, if you know what I mean. There really,
Glad you felt that, man.
yeah, oh, absolutely. I'm going, oh my God, because I'm going back. I got goosebumps right now just thinking about it, to be honest with you. And it's weird, but you think about that music, what was going on, how music was composed, how it was produced, the sounds that people were going for. Everything was very formulaic, if you will, and a very, very different. And you're right. If you didn't have a hit record, people weren't talking to you. The whole label thing was, and that was the worst period, because the 60s is when they still gave out budgets for people to go explore.
Sure.
And in the 80s, by then it was like, you can't get money unless you're I mean, it was very, very difficult to get money. So when you hear that recording and you listen to the quality of it, and it's amazing on the VHS that, I'm sure it held up, and you even have to bake it, which is great. It's tremendous. And it's a great video. So my hat's off to you. I did want to ask you, when you were playing with Cobham, you were playing like bop, post bop lines, a lot of lines at the time. And the stuff that you're doing now, that I'm watching, I'm going to touch a little bit on what you're doing today, in addition to what you did in '85. I talked to a couple of people. I said, "Tell me about your impression of Wayne Krantz," and everybody said time. Everybody went to time. Your sense of time is uncanny, and then your division of time is more like you're more of a percussionist slash drummer, with that, and really not even a Western drummer, more of an Eastern feel with all of these micro divisions that you have in your timing. Is that fair? I mean, am I making sense here?
Uh, Partially, yeah. I mean, for me, the Eastern thing, I don't really know anything about Eastern rhythm, like Indian rhythm and stuff. I don't
Right.
know. I don't know. Like to me, the broken up stuff that you're talking about, you perceptively noticing there is real. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, as far as like what my reference points is really coming from R&B. It's like it's coming
Cool.
from an R&B.
All right. Well, good. I was trying to figure out because I just said Eastern because I thrown something out there. Where is that coming from? But please talk about that some because that is a very cool thing.
I mean, as much as I can, yeah, it's pretty instinctive. But I think the thing that makes it sound, I mean, it doesn't sound necessary. I mean, hopefully it sounds funky. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
that's the bottom line for me. Like that's the groove that I
Well,
want to have.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
But I know it doesn't sound like funk, and in that sense, I think I can sort of say that about my music in general. Is it sounds jazzy, but it's not jazz, and it sounds funky, but it's not funk. It's rocky, but it's not rock, and you know that's been a nice thing and a curse, you know, because it's nice because I grew up believing that we were supposed to find our own way to do stuff
Right.
as artists. That was our job as artists, and the people that inspired me did that, and so that's what I wanted to do. But I mean, on the other hand, it can be rough because people generally like familiarity. They like being able to define things. They're more comfortable listening to something once they've kind of described it as a thing they understand. And you know that's completely understandable. It can be kind of a double-edged sword. But I mean, in the case of the rhythm thing, I think the thing that makes it sound not like just straight ahead funk is
Hmm.
what I do with the kinds of syncopations that exist in funk. Like I kind of move them around and displace them in the beat and kind of shift, you know, pull a time signature phrase from one time signature and pull it into another one. And you know, it's I mean, not in a really mechanical way. It's just that's how I hear this stuff. It's basically kind of me riffing on the kind of R&B syncopation that excited me when I was a kid, like listening to West Coast funk bands like Sons of Champlin and Tower of Power and Sly Stone and James Brown, and then of course later Prince, and like that's the stuff that always grabbed me. And so I feel like I'm just kind of taking those elements and trying to do something personal with it. It's not a math thing at all, and it's very American. Like I don't I mean mostly Black American. I
Yeah, no,
don't
now that you're explaining it to me, I'm catching on. Yeah, I'm
I mean
agreeing with you. I'm going, okay, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. I got it.
I don't know how significant that is. I mean, I guess it's significant if it helps people like it, you know.
Oh, I think it's really significant. It's certainly, it's unique because, it's unique. I listen to a lot of guitar players sitting in this Jazz Guitar Today chair that I sit in, and I'm always looking for something that differentiates people.
Mhm.
And because a lot of guys can blow through the changes, and they can, I mean, everything that we all know about. When somebody has something that is a differentiator, but your differentiator is an A plus differentiator. I mean, some guys have got they're a little different here, they're a little different there. They differentiate, but you have a really unique way of going about the rhythm on the guitar, and it's I mean, I know that when you're just a little ahead and when you're just a little behind because you're doing it on purpose. You know what I mean? You're
Mhm.
playing with the rhythm.
Ahead, probably not on purpose, Bob. If you hear me playing, that's me screwing up. Behind, yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
That you're playing within the playing with, and then what I was listening to, you guys, playing together, you and Keith and Lefebvre, there's such an interweave of rhythm going on. It's not
Mhm.
just the melodic and it's not the harmonic. There's such an interweave of rhythm going on, and Keith can play a few notes,
Oh
and
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
and it's like freaking, you know, it's strong. I mean, it's really, really strong. So that's very cool.
Nice.
So let me just get back to 1985 here. So what's your plan for this project? I mean, are you are you gonna like you know, clone yourself and go out as a like a five-piece Wayne Krantz band? You know?
Somebody was asking about that the other day. I mean, yeah, that's what it would. I mean, there's three guitar tracks on that record. Basically, it's two rhythm parts that kind of interlock, right, and then down the center is the melody. So, and because there's no improvising. I mean, really, there's almost none. Then what that means is what's on the record is the song. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that gets played by those three guitars and the keyboard and the drums and the bass is the song. So I want to play the song. I have to play it like that. And that means playing like more compositionally, unless I go the route of kind of rearranging it for, say, for trio or something. I've done that before with my stuff. And to be honest, it hasn't been that satisfying for me. I mean, the likelihood that I would tour that music, I'm not sure how it would work or how it would happen. I could see though, depending, I mean, if people like it, if
Mm-hmm.
people did like it, I could see writing some stuff in the spirit of that music
Oh,
and
that'd be cool.
for
Yeah,
an existing band like
that
KCS band that I play.
that would be cool. Well, Cowboy's kind of a cool tune. I mean, you know, I mean that's a real cool
Yeah,
tune, you know.
but
And
I mean, again, to play that song, I'd have to play that song. You
yeah,
know,
no, I get, I hear what you're saying. That's what I was thinking of. Going, well, this is cool. Well, now, what's he going to do with this? How's?
right. Well,
But
I mean,
you know what? And you don't have to tour it. You know, it just could be. You know, just it's just a little. It's a gem you're throwing out there for the universe to. You know, I don't mean to get too fluffy here, but it's a gem you're.
I live in that fluff, Bob. Don't worry about it.
I kind of dig it. I've seen you around the corner of a couple of clouds every now and then, you know, um, but no, but it's really, it's a cool piece. And, what's getting back to it, it holds up, you know, really, really frickin' well. And I mean, I enjoyed listening to what I listened to, and
Listen to the rest of it. Listen to
I'm going to
every
have to,
note.
I
It's only 28 minutes long, man. You know?
I will finish it. I promise you, I will finish it. You know how shit goes. You know, you can
You
get
do.
going on something. Well, listen, this is an honor, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I'm so grateful. And this is going to sound a little weird, but I'm so grateful that there are artists like you on this planet.
Thanks.
And does that sound weird? I guess it does. But you know,
Why would that be weird, man?
you're so pure to
Weird.
you're so pure to your spirit. It comes out in your music, whether you're playing with Donald Fagen, or you're playing your own thing, or you're playing with your trio, or the things. I saw you playing with Billy and all that. You know, there's no question that your heart is so melded to what you're doing, and I just really, really dig it. So it's an honor to talk to you.
Thank you very much. I
So
appreciate it.
we're here with Wayne Krantz. We want to remind you to go check out his newest project, which is old, which
It
is
is.
Wayne Krantz Music Room, 1985, and we'll put all the contact information on the article when it comes out. So thank
Thank you
you,
so
Wayne,
much.
very much, man. It's truly an honor for me. Thank you. See
Take
you
it
later
easy.
now. Bye bye.
Bye.